Welcome to The Raven and the Owl, where legends, mysteries, and the deepest lore of Westeros come alive. Today, we are exploring the Targaryen dynasty who ruled a world without dragons. So, sit back. The story begins now. The silence. After fire, the dance of the dragons ended, not with triumph, but with exhaustion. Castles still stood, crowns still glittered. The Iron Throne remained where it had always been, cold, sharp, and waiting. Yet something vital had vanished from the world. For nearly a century, dragons had defined power in Westeros. They were not merely weapons, nor symbols, nor curiosities of Valyrian blood. They were certainty. Certainty that rebellion would burn. Certainty that kingship carried fire behind it. Certainty that the Targaryens were something more than mortal rulers seated upon a mortal throne. When the last great battles of the dance faded into memory, that certainty faded with them. The dragons did not disappear in a single night. They dwindled. Some died, screaming in battle. Some withered within the dragon pit, their flames dimming like candles starved of air. Others lived just long enough to become stories, pale reflections of the gods that once ruled the sky. And with their passing came a strange quiet. The realm did not fall into chaos. No great enemy invaded. No rival house seized the throne. Instead, Westeros entered an age historians struggle to name, a century marked less by conquest than consequence. The wars had been fought, the blood had been spilled. What remained was inheritance. A generation of rulers shaped not by the glory of dragons, but by the memory of them. Kings who ruled a realm still haunted by fire, yet forced to govern without it. It was an age of fragile peace, uneasy healing, and quiet fractures spreading beneath the surface of stability. For the small folk, life resumed its rhythms. Harvests gathered, markets opened, roads traveled by knights seeking coin and honor. But beneath those ordinary days lingered the shadow of loss. The dragons had been terror and wonder both. Their absence left not relief, but uncertainty. If dragons had made kings unquestionable, what happened when they were gone? This question would echo across the century that followed. Some kings sought glory through conquest, hoping steel might replace flame. Some sought holiness, believing peace could mend wounds dragons had helped create. Others governed with patience and pragmatism, trying simply to preserve what remained. Yet even in quiet years, history does not sleep. Old rivalries sharpened. Legacies of careless love and bitter resentment took root. The blood of the dragon, though no longer winged, still burned in human hearts. The century after the dance would produce no dragon riders of legend, but it would shape something equally enduring: the conflicts, ideals, and tragedies that defined the Targaryen dynasty's mortal age. It was a time when kings learned that authority without fear must be earned, when honor proved as dangerous as ambition, when rebellion could begin not with armies, but with whispers carried through halls and tawny fields, and far from courts and councils, on dusty roads winding through villages and forests, a hedge knight and a hidden prince would walk quietly through the aftermath of that vanished age, witnesses to a realm learning how to live without dragons. This is the story of those years, not an age of fire, but an age shaped by its ashes. And it begins with Aegon III, the boy who watched dragons die when the dance of the dragons ended. The Iron Throne passed to a child, Aegon III, son of Rhaenyra Targaryen, had seen more death than most old men. He had watched his mother devoured before his eyes. He had flown upon Stormcloud only to see the dragon die beneath him. The Maesters would later call him Dragonbane, not because he slew dragons with sword or poison, but because dragons seemed to wither in his presence, as if grief itself were a kind of winter. In truth, the dragons were already dying. The dance had broken their numbers, their breeding, perhaps even the magic that sustained them. Yet under Aegon's reign, the last surviving dragons dwindled into pale, sickly creatures, shadows of the gods that once ruled the sky. Aegon did not love them, he feared them, and so the dragon pit fell quiet. His reign was one of healing rather than glory. Regents ruled while he withdrew into silence, leaving governance to stronger wills, among them his brother Viserys, a boy presumed lost, but returned from exile. It was Viserys who learned to rule, Aegon who endured. Daeron I, the young dragon's brief flame. Aegon III's son, Daeron I, grew in the shadow of dragonless kingship. Where his father had been cautious, Daeron burned with restless ambition. At 14, he wore the crown. At 15, he led an army. Without dragons, he sought conquest with steel, turning his gaze toward Dorne, the one realm the Targaryens had never subdued. And for a moment, it seemed the impossible had been achieved. Dorne bent the knee. Songs hailed him as the young dragon reborn. But conquest is easier than rule. Dornish resistance festered in shadowed passes and hidden knives. 2 years later, beneath a banner of peace, Daeron was betrayed and slain. He died a conqueror with no conquest to show for it, a king whose glory flickered and vanished like dragonfire in rain. Baelor I, the king who prayed for peace. The crown passed to Daeron's brother, Baelor, remembered as blessed. Baelor sought peace where Daeron had sought victory. Barefoot, he walked the long road to Dorne, returning captives and ending war through humility rather than blood. His reign was gentle and troubling. He fasted until he weakened. He imprisoned his own sisters to preserve their purity. He built septs while the realm quietly wondered whether holiness and kingship could coexist. Baelor did not die in battle or intrigue. He died as he had lived, fasting, praying, fading. And when he died without heir, the crown passed to the brother who had long stood quietly behind the throne. Viserys II, the king who had always ruled. Viserys II had spent decades as Hand, first to his brother Aegon, then to Daeron, then to Baelor. Where others dreamed, Viserys governed. He was pragmatic, disciplined, and weary in the way capable men become when surrounded by fragile rulers. When the crown finally came to him, it felt less like ascension and more like inevitability. The realm gained a capable king, but not for long. His reign lasted scarcely a year. Some whispered poison, others called it age. Either way, Viserys died swiftly, leaving the throne to his son, a man whose rule would echo louder than all the quiet kings before him. Aegon IV, the return of excess. Aegon IV inherited a stable realm built by careful hands. He did not preserve it. Where Viserys had ruled with restraint, Aegon ruled with appetite. Feasts grew grander, court intrigues sharper, favor became currency. Yet his greatest legacy was not gluttony, nor cruelty, nor neglect. It was children, true-born and bastard alike, princes and rivals, born from the same careless love. Among them stood Daeron, the lawful heir, Daemon, the beloved warrior, Brynden and Aegor, whose rivalry would outlive kings. And when Aegon lay dying, he made one final gesture, legitimizing those bastards, giving them names history could not ignore. With that stroke, the quiet century after the dance came to its true end. The dragons were gone, but the blood of the dragon had found a new way to burn. From Aegon III to Aegon IV, House Targaryen drifted through a century defined not by fire, but by absence. The last dragons died, conquests failed, holiness faltered, pragmatism faded, and into that silence stepped a king whose legacy would fracture the dynasty more deeply than Dragonfire ever had. The dance had ended the age of dragons. Aegon the Unworthy would begin the age of rebellion. Daeron II, the good king, the questioned son. When Aegon IV died, the Iron Throne passed without contest to his true-born son. Daeron II had spent his youth preparing for rule-reading histories, studying diplomacy, enduring a father's public scorn with quiet patience. Where Aegon had indulged, Daeron restrained. Where Aegon divided, Daeron sought unity. His marriage to Miriah Martell of Dorne did more than produce heirs. It healed a century-old wound. Through patience, rather than conquest, Dorne entered the realm at last. A triumph no dragon had achieved. Yet peace has a curious way of breeding resentment. Some lords mistrusted Dornish influence. Some knights longed for the simpler clarity of war. And some remembered another son of Aegon IV, a son whose claim rested not on law, but on admiration. Daemon Blackfyre. The alternative. King Daemon had grown into the promise many once saw in him. He was the warrior Daeron was not. The image of kingship, forged in tourneys and battlefields, rather than council chambers. The sword Blackfyre hung at his side like prophecy. Men saw him ride and remembered Aegon the Conqueror. And though Daeron ruled wisely, whispers began to gather. Not accusations, not treason, but questions. Was strength not the truest mark of kingship? Did the sword not speak louder than parchment? Had Aegon IV, in gifting Blackfyre, revealed his true preference? Daemon himself did not immediately rebel, but men do not need crowns to inspire loyalty. Sometimes, admiration alone is enough. Rivalries beneath the crown. Between Daeron and Daemon stood two other sons of Aegon IV, bastards legitimized, yet never free from rivalry. Brynden Rivers, called Bloodraven, served Daeron with a loyalty sharpened by intelligence and prophecy. A pale figure, soft-spoken, feared more than loved. Opposite him stood Aegon Rivers, bitter steel, fierce, proud, bound to Daemon by shared resentment. And between these two men lay more than politics. They shared love for the same woman, Shiera Seastar, another of Aegon's complicated legacies. Thus, the coming war would not merely be brother against brother. It would be rivalry against rivalry, wound against wound. The first Blackfyre rebellion, when whispers became war. The rebellion did not erupt suddenly. It gathered like a storm beyond the horizon, alliances forged quietly, loyalties tested in private halls. When Daemon finally declared his claim, it felt less like rebellion than revelation. The realm had already chosen sides in its heart. Lords of the Reach, the Riverlands, and beyond rallied to the Black Dragon. Others stood with Daeron, defending the fragile peace he had built. And so Westeros marched to war once more, not for territory or vengeance, but for legitimacy itself. The Redgrass Field, the death of a dream. The armies met beneath a sky heavy with dust and destiny. At the center rode Daemon, his sons beside him, Blackfyre blazing like the memory of dragons. For a time, it seemed the songs might be true. That valor alone could decide the fate of kings. Daemon carved a path through the loyalist lines, steadying his men and frightening his foes. Across the field fought Baelor Breakspear, Daeron's heir, Dornish and Dragonblood, united in one figure. The future Daemon's cause threatened to erase. And behind it all, watching with patient calculation, stood Bloodraven. The moment came not with trumpet or duel, but with silence. Hidden archers loosed their shafts. Arrows darkened the sky. Daemon fell. His twin sons fell beside him. Not defeated by weakness, nor cowardice, but by the ruthless necessity of war. The rebel host faltered. Bittersteel fought to retrieve his king's body, rage and grief warring within him. But even fury cannot turn a battlefield already lost. By sunset, the rebellion lay broken, yet its memory burned brighter than victory. Exile. Bittersteel's oath. Bittersteel fled across the narrow sea with Daemon's surviving heirs. There, he forged the Golden Company, a brotherhood not bound by coin alone, but by promise. They would return, not if, but when. In exile, the Blackfyre cause transformed from rebellion into legend, from legend into inheritance. Fathers told sons of Redgrass, sellswords whispered of a crown waiting across the sea. And in Westeros, Daeron ruled on victorious, yet never entirely free of the doubt his father had created. The realm that Dunk and Egg inherit the years after Redgrass were quieter, yet never peaceful. The wound had closed, but the scar remained. Children were born who had never seen the battlefield, yet carried its memory in stories told by fathers. Among them would be princes, including a boy named Aegon, called Egg. He would grow beside a hedge knight, hearing tales of Daemon's valor, Bloodraven's arrows, and Bittersteel's exile. And though Egg never saw Redgrass himself, its shadow would shape his reign as surely as if he had fought there. For the Blackfyre rebellion did more than kill a claimant. It divided a dynasty. And dynasties, once divided, spend generations trying to remember how they were ever whole. Baelor Breakspear, the future, Westeros, lost prince. Baelor Breakspear, eldest son of Daeron II, carried within him the promise of reconciliation. His mother was Dornish, his blood both dragon and sun. Where others saw division, Baelor embodied unity, a prince who could bridge the lingering distrust that Redgrass had left behind. He fought bravely in the rebellion, earning respect even among those who had once ridden for Daemon. By the time the realm gathered at Ashford Meadow, Baelor stood not merely as heir, but as hope. The tourney was meant to celebrate knighthood, honor, and peace restored. Instead, it became another hinge of history. Ashford Meadow Justice, written in blood. Ashford began with banners and songs, yet beneath the spectacle lay quiet tensions, rivalries, pride, and the lingering arrogance of princes. It was here that Sir Duncan the Tall, a hedge knight with borrowed armor and uncertain lineage, struck Prince Aegon Brightflame for cruelty. A simple act of honor, a dangerous act against royalty. Dunk demanded justice, a trial by combat. Aegon answered with something grander, a trial by 7, an ancient rite calling champions to both sides. Baelor Breakspear fought not as prince, but as knight, defending fairness itself. In the chaos of the melee, confusion reigned, allies clashed, blows fell without recognition. And then, tragedy. Baelor was struck down, not by malice, but mischance, a blow from his own brother Maekar during the frenzy of battle. The wound seemed slight, yet death often arrives quietly. Baelor died soon after, leaving the realm bereft of the king it had already begun to love. For Dunk, Ashford was beginning. For Westeros, it was loss. Egg, the boy who had revealed himself as Prince Aegon to save Dunk, would carry the memory of Baelor's death as one more lesson in how fragile honor could be. After Ashford, the shadow returns across the sea. Baelor's death did not ignite rebellion. but it removed a stabilizing future. Daeron aged. Aerys, bookish and withdrawn, stood next in line. Bloodraven's influence deepened, and across the narrow sea, Bittersteel watched, waiting as he always had. The second Blackfyre rebellion. The tourney at White Walls years later. Rebellion returned not with armies, but with masquerade. Demon the second Blackfyre, son of the fallen demon, crossed into Westeros under guise and charm. Rather than open war, his allies plotted a symbolic uprising centered around a grand tourney at White Walls. The plan was elegant. Gather sympathetic lords. Reveal the Blackfyre heir. Crown him amidst celebration before loyalists could react. But Bloodraven's eyes were everywhere. Before banners could rise, the plot unraveled. Daemon II was captured without battle, his dream ending in chains rather than glory. It was a rebellion undone not by swords, but by secrecy, a reminder that Bloodraven fought wars in silence. For Dunk and Egg, present at White Walls, it was their first glimpse of how easily pageantry could conceal treason. The third Blackfyre rebellion, Aegon's return, the next attempt, came more traditionally. Aegon Blackfyre, another of Daemon's sons, launched invasion with the Golden Company, Bittersteel ever at his side, aging yet unbroken. Armies clashed in scattered engagements across Westeros, yet the rebellion never gained the momentum of Redgrass. The realm, weary of war, rallied swiftly. Aegon was defeated, captured, and slain while attempting escape, a death lacking grandeur, yet heavy with inevitability. Bittersteel survived once more, and survival continued to be his curse. Bittersteel's final years, a life defined by a single battle. By the time of later rebellions, Bittersteel had become more symbol than man, the living memory of Redgrass, the last witness to Daemon's fall. He trained sons of exile, commanded sellswords, and carried grief like armor. Each rebellion failed. Each failure aged him. Yet he never relinquished the vow. When Bittersteel died, his skull was dipped in gold and carried by the Golden Company, a grim relic of loyalty and defiance. Even in death, he marched with them. Dunk and Egg, walking through history's aftermath. By the time Dunk and Egg wander the roads of Westeros, the great rebellions have faded into stories, yet their echoes remain everywhere. At tourneys, men boast of ancestors who fought at Redgrass. In taverns, sellswords whisper of the Golden Company's return. At court, Bloodraven's shadow lingers in every cautious decision. Dunk sees only the surface: knights, lords, quarrels, and chance encounters. Egg sees more. He sees how the choices of his forebears shaped the world he must someday rule. How a king's careless love birthed rebellion. How rebellion birthed exile. How exile birthed legends that refused to die. And as Dunk teaches Egg honor, history teaches him caution. The quiet between rebellions. The age of Dunk and Egg is not one of great wars, but of aftermath. A fragile peace balanced atop memory, loyalty, and unresolved dreams. Baela's death removed unity. Bloodraven's vigilance preserved order. Bittersteel's exile preserved defiance. And between these forces walked a hedge knight and a hidden prince, two small figures moving through the quiet spaces history leaves between its louder chapters. Yet those quiet spaces are where character is forged, where kings are shaped, where legends begin not with crowns, but with friendship. Now we move into the years where the realm grows quieter on the surface and heavier beneath it. The rebellions have not vanished, only thinned into memory and watchfulness. And the Iron Throne passes once more, not to the strongest, but to the next surviving son. Let the page turn from Aerys I to Egg's crown, the quiet road to kingship. Aerys I, the king who dreamed of prophecy. When Daeron II died, the crown passed to his second son. Aerys I was not made for rule in the way warriors are made for war. He loved scrolls more than councils, prophecy more than policy. The world of men bored him. The world of dreams fascinated him. Thus the realm came to be governed by another. Brynden Rivers, Bloodraven, Hand of the King. Under Bloodraven, peace endured, but it was the uneasy peace of watchful eyes. Spies listened, ravens flew, plots withered before blooming. For Dunk and Egg, traveling the roads during these years, Westeros seemed stable, but stability built on vigilance carries its own cost fear without visible war. The third Blackfyre, stirring, war prevented before it began. During Aerys's reign, the Blackfyre cause flickered again. Plots formed, alliances whispered, yet Bloodraven moved faster than rebellion itself. Through arrests, intelligence, and quiet executions, he prevented another Redgrass before armies could gather. The realm remained peaceful, but in taverns and exile camps alike, Bloodraven's name became both shield and spectre. The Great Spring Sickness, a realm in mourning. Then came plague. The Great Spring Sickness swept Westeros like an unseen army, carrying away lords, knights, and common folk alike. Many heirs besides were lost, thinning the royal line, leaving succession precarious. By the time Aerys himself died childless, the crown again passed sideways along the branches of the Targaryen tree. To Maekar the First, the Iron King with a soldier's heart. Maekar the First, fourth son of Daeron II, had spent his life as soldier rather than ruler. Where Aerys dreamed, Maekar acted. where Bloodraven whispered, Maekar commanded. His reign was stern, pragmatic, and shaped by loss. The death of Baelor, the fading of his brothers, the memory of rebellions, never fully gone. His sons reflected the contradictions of House Targaryen itself. Daeron, brilliant yet lost to drink. Aerion Brightflame, cruel and unstable, convinced of his own divine destiny. Aemon, gentle scholar destined for the citadel. And Aegon, Egg, the overlooked fourth son, shaped not by court, but by road. Dunk and Egg, the road that made a king. Long before crown or council, Egg walked beside Sir Duncan the Tall. He saw small folk hunger. He heard veterans speak of redgrass. He learned that kingship was less about glory than burden. Dunk taught him honor in simple acts, defending the weak, speaking truth, enduring hardship. Lessons no Meister's book could offer. Thus, Egg grew into a prince, unlike any other Targaryen, a boy who understood the realm not from throne, but from roadside. The Peak Uprising, Maekar's final battle. The peace of Maekar's reign shattered during the Peak Uprising, a rebellion born from lingering Blackfyre sympathies and old grievances. House Peak raised banners against the crown, not with the strength of a great rebellion, but with enough defiance to demand response. Maekar led the assault personally, as he had led battles all his life. The fighting was brutal and intimate. Siege ladders, stone walls, steel ringing in narrow courtyards. Victory came, but kings do not always live to see victory's aftermath. Maekar was struck down during the assault, killed not by grand duel, but by the chaos that claims soldiers and kings alike. With his death, the Targaryen succession once again stood uncertain. The Great Council of 233 AC, choosing the unexpected, King Maekar's heirs, offered little clarity. Daeron was dead. Aegon had perished in madness, drinking wildfire, in belief it would transform him into dragon. Aemon had sworn himself to the citadel, renouncing crown and ambition alike. Thus, the realm turned to council. Lords gathered, claims debated, bloodlines weighed against temperament, and in the end, the crown passed to the man least prepared for it, yet perhaps most shaped by the realm itself. Aegon, Egg, Egg's path to the throne, a crown, heavy with memory. Egg did not ascend amid triumph. He ascended amid ghosts, ghosts of Redgrass, ghosts of Baelor, ghosts of rebellions that lingered across the narrow sea. He brought Dunk to court, not as relic of youth, but as reminder of truth, a living connection to the people he meant to serve. As Aegon V, Egg sought reform, justice, and relief for small folk whose lives had been shaped by wars they never chose. But reform threatened lords accustomed to privilege, and the Blackfyre cause, though weakened, still stirred beyond Westeros. Aegon's reign became a balancing act between compassion and tradition, the final chapter in the long aftermath of Aegon IV's fatal decree. The boy, the knight, and the weight of history. From Aerys's dreams to Maekar's battlefield death, the road to Aegon's crown was shaped not by destiny alone, but by absence, lost heirs, broken lines, fading certainties. The Blackfyre rebellions had fractured the dynasty. The quiet kings that followed had preserved it, and Aegon, raised among common folk, inherited both fracture and preservation. He would rule with hope where others ruled with caution. But hope, like rebellion, carries risk. Yet that is a story for another fire, another night. For now, the hedge knight stands beside the king he once called squire. The realm rests in uneasy peace, and history, as it always does, waits.